Welcome back to Biomes. This time, Emily and I will be talking about the Canadian Prairies. So the Canadian Prairies specifically are a rather large biome that extends pretty much across the entirety of Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba, as well as into a few parts of British Columbia and Ontario. The prairie grassland region does also extend down into the United States, but those aren't the Canadian prairies. They're kind of their own-ish biome with very similar features to the Canadian prairies, but I'm Canadian, so let's talk about those ones. The prairie's main feature is just being very large and very flat. It's generally doesn't have a lot of geographical features except for maybe a couple hills and valleys. It's pretty much just flat, straight grassland where you can see fur everywhere. There are three main types of Canadian prairies, those being tall grass, mixed grass, and fescue, which are just kind of classified based on what type of grass they have. So, pretty much all of the plant life contained within the prairies are various types of wild grasses, as well as some small shrubs and wildflowers, but the main plant life that you will see in the prairies is grass. Tall grass prairies are typically classified by having very, very tall grass, like real tall, and the main being blue stem or Indian grass. Fescue prairies are a little bit shorter grasses, mainly fescue grass, which is where it gets the name, and mixed are kind of a combination of the two. And depending on where you are in the prairie provinces, you will get different types of prairies as well as the different types of wildlife that go within them. Now, there are other plants there, like trees, usually trees that are more sun and wind tolerant, like willows and poplars, that have less water and shade requirements. And while prairies can look pretty plain and boring and lacking in interesting wildlife, it's actually very biodiverse and some of the most biodiverse ecosystems in the world. There's a lot of stuff going on there. Some of the most popular and prominent features are large animals such as the plains bison, which are very famous for living all throughout the prairies until they were largely hunted to endangerment or extinction by European settlers. The populations have been bouncing back, and they are a keystone species in both the ecosystem and the culture around it, namely indigenous cultures. There's also other large grazing mammals such as elk and deer. Those mainly stay towards the edge because they're more adapted to the forest in most cases, but they do venture out onto the prairies. Another feature of the Canadian prairies is the pronghorn antelope, which despite its name is not actually that closely related to true antelopes. It is actually the fastest land animal in the Americas. It can run very, very fast. It's the fastest land mammal, in North or South America. So they can also be found there. A variety of smaller predators, such as swift foxes, red foxes, and bobcats can be found in the Canadian prairies as well, along with larger predators such as coyotes, gray wolves, and the occasional cougar. However, cougars live more in the mountain regions and forest regions and aren't really seen on open prairies that often. It's very uncommon to see a cougar there, but it's not unheard of. And of course, they prey on one of the main staples of the prairie regions, the prairie dogs, that make super massive, extensive burrows all throughout the prairies and the grasslands, and they are another keystone species, very, very important to the prairies, mostly as a food source, but even the burrows themselves have other functions. Other digging animals, such as the American badger, will also make use of prairie dog burrows as their homes, and even owl species, such as this little guy, the burrowing owl, one of the, in my opinion, best prairie animals. They are unfortunately endangered, and I have made an endangered species spotlight feature on them, as well as on this guy, the black-footed ferret, who's now featured multiple times on my account, but they also make use of prairie dogs as both a food source and a home in their burrows as well. So while prairie dogs are typically seen as a nuisance to many people who live in the area, they do serve many very, very important functions in the ecosystem. Other animals that feature in the prairies include things like this guy, the sharp-tailed grouse, and a number of raptor species, including peregrine falcons, and this guy, the red-tailed hawk. And there are a number of reptiles and amphibians there, including snakes like this guy, the bull snake, but also things like garter snakes, and if you go towards British Columbia, even rattlesnakes. Now, unfortunately, due to a wide variety of reasons, mainly industrialization and agriculture, prairies are as a whole decreasing throughout North America in both Canada and the United States. The area overall has shrunk massively from the historical size of it, and with it, many animals are becoming endangered and extinct, as well as plants too. And prairies are a very, very important ecosystem in both human use and environmental cases, so conservation is definitely necessary to maintain and stabilize the prairies so they will be here for a long time to come.